Bloom News Brief. More info at fullandbloom.com. Guitarist Vivian Campbell was recently interviewed by VintageRock.com. On his favorite Dio tracks, Campbell said, "I was never fond of the Sacred Heart album. The mood in the band was very dark then. Ronnie's mood was very dark, and nobody wanted to be in the studio, so I don't listen to that record much. But every time I do hear something, I think, wow, I did play pretty good on that. I like the solo in The Last in Line, the title track of that album. I think that's a well-constructed solo. Obviously, I'm proud of the solo in Rainbow in the Dark, but I wouldn't say that's a well-constructed solo, because that was a first take and I didn't know what I was doing. But I think I got really lucky with it. There's different aspects of other solos on the early Dio records that were like pulling teeth. I really had to kind of make composites out of some of them. Don't Talk to Strangers, I think, is a particularly strong solo. On being fired from Dio, I'd like to clarify, I was fired from Dio. I did not leave Dio, and that's a bit of an urban myth, because all these decades after, a lot of people are under the misconception thinking that I left the band. I never wanted to leave Dio. I was fired in the middle of a tour, but I was the squeaky wheel. I was the one who was trying to get Ronnie to uphold his promises and be true to his words, and it didn't work out. Ronnie's wife, Wendy, right up until the day he died, she was his manager, and she never saw me as being of any value to Ronnie. She always thought that I was just a guitar player and I was easily replaceable. I think Ronnie knew a little better, so I think if Ronnie and I had met each other without Wendy, and we'd gone to the pub, and we'd had a pint of beer, and talked through our differences, I think we could have worked together again, and it would have been great. But as long as Wendy was controlling his career, that was never going to happen. On if he had any regrets about not making amends with Ronnie James Dio before his passing. Yeah, we both said ugly things about each other in the media, which is never a good idea, but you get goaded into these things. Ronnie was a complicated guy. When people ask me, what's so-and-so like? It's hard to summarize the human experience in a couple of sentences. I mean, we're all complicated beings. We have good days and we have bad days. We have good attributes from our personalities and we have negative ones. And Ronnie was complicated. We had days when he and I got along really well, and there were days where I thought he was a total asshole, and I'm sure he thought exactly the same about me. But the one thing we did good together was we could make music together. I always found it a very strained relationship, and I will own most of the responsibility for that, because I was very bashful around Ronnie. I was 20 years old, and I'd been listening to Ronnie and Rainbow and Sabbath for years before I ended up being in a band with them, and finding myself in the studio in LA, and just in this whole surreal, very different environment that I'd known before, and being in a band with this guy whose albums I'd been listening to since I was about 13 years old. So I just had this strange sort of deference towards him, where he was a rock star in my opinion. Plus he was so much older than me. You almost wanted to call him Mr. Dio. I didn't, but I kind of felt like it, like I probably should be more respectful in that regard. So it was a little strange to have that sort of relationship. I never felt quite comfortable around him. The only time I did was when we were playing music. To read the entire interview, click the link in the description.